In 2009, Orewa College allowed students to bring their own device to school. In 2012, we made it compulsory for Year 9s to bring an internet-capable wireless device to school, and we recommended at that stage the iPad. It's 3 years since that decision of compulsory BYOD, and that cohort of students have gone through their first year of Level 1 NCEA in 2014. So how did we go? How has it gone? We asked teachers who took a Level 1 class in 2014 to do a TAI, a Teaching as Inquiry, and look at what digital interventions did they make with that class and what did they feel the effects were, and provide us with a bit of data as to those effects. Common to all all of the teachers, because it was mandated by the school, was the use of our learning management system, Ultranet, and the use of a blog or even a Google Doc in order for students to showcase their work or be able to give them feedback, formative feedback, before they submitted a bit of work. The other common approaches were in line with the pedagogical shift we've been asking teachers to make for the last 2 years, and that was the more flipped approach to teaching, making classrooms fluid. In other words, we're not sitting in rows and rooms, we can be outside, we can be inside. The use of digital media such as YouTube channels, obviously the acceptance of multimedia work and handing in work and ways of students demonstrating their understanding and their knowledge. We use subject-specific apps, but we stayed away from apps as much as we could because of the cost of buying them for students. And we hope to use things like Socrative, and all the staff reported that they use 1, 2 or 3 or more of these approaches in their teaching at Level 1 to a greater or lesser extent. So how did we go with our overall NCEA Level 1 results? Well, you can see from the blue line that Orewa College since 2011 has steadily increased upwards to the point where in 2014 the cohort, that's the cohort who were introduced to the iPads 3 years earlier, have actually performed above the decile 8 to 10 national average. And that decile 8 to 10 national average includes, of course, private schools, single-sex schools, independent schools and the co-ed schools. So we're quite pleased about that. We're also quite interested in the quite significant upward trend of our results since 2012, when we made the decision to go with the iPads, or made the compulsory BYOD decision. And anecdotal feedback from staff would indicate that because they were teaching in a new pedagogical sort of way, because they were forced into a digital environment, they transferred a lot of that pedagogy into their Year 11 classes and Year 12 classes that preceded the Year 9s as they started in 2012. Also, the fact that those senior classes in 2012 and 13 were witnessing the Year 9s and 10s bringing along their own device, and suddenly it became worthwhile for them bringing along a device which many of them had anyway. Anecdotal evidence we know, but we do notice since we made the decision to go BYD right across the school, our Level 1 results have gone up, and a similar trend applies to our Level 2 results. Okay, so what about a little bit more detail? We know we're better than the national average from decile 8 to 10 in terms of overall achievement rates for Level 1. But it's important to us to look a bit more detail for that and look at our not achieves, our merits and excellence. And then more so, it's important for us to understand whether our external results were impacted by students having a one-to-one device, or our internal results were impacted by students having a one-to-one device. One of the concerns we had for externals, for example, was that by students using a one-to-one device for the last 3 years and typing rather than physically writing, this might have a negative impact on the ability to sit down and physically write exams for 3 hours. So how did we go? Well, when we have a look at it, at this graph here, we can see that against the national average, we traditionally were about the same. And this is the national average for decile 9s, and it's for external standards. For our achieved results, we're better than the national average. Again, that's traditionally been there or thereabouts and where we've been at. For our merit results, we're actually at the national average, and that's the first time we've been at or above the national average in our level 1 results. And it's pleasing that it's an external standards, it's the actual physical handwritten standards. And for excellence, we're traditionally where we normally are, below the national average. However, the gap between us and where the national average sits is the lowest it's been for excellence results that we've had at the school. And we know we're doing better than previous years because if we look at the graph next door to this one, we compare our external standards of the 2014 cohort, that's the cohort with the BYOD, the bring your own device, and that's in green, with the immediate previously year's cohort, and that's the 2013 level ones. We know that both cohorts were about the same in intelligence, and we picked that up from their GPA scores in year 10, and there was no significance between the two. So let's look at the results. Our not achieves are down, which means we did better. We must have got more achieves, merits and excellence somewhere. We got less achieves, so again, where have those results gone? We got more merits in the externals than the previous cohort. That's good, we've never done that before, and that's quite pleasing. And we got more excellences. So our results are moving upwards, are trending up towards the excellences, which really reinforces what we're seeing against national averages, and that means our merits are up there, and while our excellences are still behind, the gap is closing. Okay, what about our internal results for internal standards? Again, traditionally, we've had the same pattern. We do okay against our decile 9 comparable schools nationally for achieved and not achieved, but our merits and excellences are usually down on that decile 9. So again, once again, we look at the graph that we're looking at, comparing ourselves with the national average. Okay, we can see in this graph that we're better in terms of the not achieves. We've certainly got much more achieves. However, we're still down for our internal standards. It's the internal standards. We're still down on merits, and we're still down on excellences. Surprised us a little bit. We thought we'd do a little bit better, more so than we did with the externals. However, while we are behind the national levels, we have improved significantly on what we've done in the past for merits and for excellences. And we can see that again in this graph next to us. When we compare the 2013 level 1 cohort, which didn't have a digital device, which is in the orange, compared to the 2014 cohort, which did have a digital device. You can see a lot less not achieves. The achieves aren't as good as the previous cohort, but the merits are the same, and the excellences are certainly up on the previous cohort. So we're again quite happy. We would have hoped to have got a few more excellences, but we can look at that over the coming year. Right, so let's look at one individual subject. Let's drill down a little bit deeper and see what happened in one particular subject. As in the past, okay, with most of our results and in most of our subjects, we sit there against the national average for decile 9 schools for not achieves and achieves. We perform better at those two levels, but traditionally we perform worse at merits and excellences. So what I've done in this case is I've taken our merits and excellences, added them together to give a score, okay, and taken the national merits and excellences and added together to give a score. Okay, and we've broken it down teacher by teacher within one subject area. Right, you can see that some teachers are significantly above the merit and excellence level for decile 9 schools. Right. You can see some teachers are significantly below the decile level for decile 9 schools. Right. Overall, this subject sits within what we've normally seen, and that's we're better at not achieves, we're better at achieves, we are not as good as merits and excellences. But the interesting thing about this data is when we talk to those teachers A, B and C and ask them, A, B, C, D and E, and ask them what digital interventions they made, they can, through data, provide evidence of what they did differently. Teacher A, who got some very good results, particularly at the excellence and merit level, okay, had very little intervention in terms of a digital intervention. He used Ultranet, and he used a blog, and he used one of the apps that suits his subject pretty well. But the students, as he pointed out very rightly, and he could demonstrate this with data, came in as a bright group. It was a bright group of students that came into him. Their GPAs were at merit and excellence levels from year 10. So we would expect that they get good results, and they did. They got good results. Teacher B could also demonstrate that her students coming into the class didn't have very good results as year 10 students. Their GPAs were quite low, their grade point averages were quite low, right? And she was quite proud to demonstrate that she had moved them quite significantly up into the achieved category from the not achieved category. And with data and tracking, this was evident to see. So she was quite happy, even though her results were probably the worst when compared to a national average for merits and excellences. But she was very happy with the overall achieved merit and excellence she got. She had moved the class a significant amount. She did use a lot of digital interventions. She did find a bit of resistance, which we'll talk about next time, but she also found that the students, in terms of basic presentation of work, were quite into it, and she believes that that helped with their overall achievement level being quite high. Teacher C didn't try much in the way of digital interventions, had an average class, and did poorly in terms of the merits and excellences. So that's quite interesting for us. And teachers D and E, young teachers, both used a lot of digital interventions, a lot of digital strategies, changed their pedagogy significantly, and it's interesting to see that both teachers, for merits and excellences, got up there or thereabouts around the national average or above. So that's interesting sort of data that we're looking at. Of course, HODs will look at data in more detail. So what are some of the common findings? Well, some of the common themes that we got were for our middle to upper ability students. They took to the BYOD and using BYOD and a different teaching pedagogy, a more independent pedagogy, getting feedback, getting feed forward like ducks to water. They enjoyed it. They enjoyed the independence, they enjoyed being let go, they enjoyed being able to produce multimedia bits of work, they enjoyed being able to use video, and they enjoyed actually negotiating their own curriculum, for want of a better word, by saying, do I have to study A to get this information? Can I study B to get the same information? And staff, on the whole, were happy to let them move along those lines. They particularly liked the blogs, or if we used a Google shared doc or something, to get feedback, instant feedback on their work, and modify their work as they went along, rather than summative feedback at the end of a piece of work. So that was one of the things, one of the learnings that we should take from this. This is opposed to what we'd call our lower to lower ability students. They liked being able to produce digital bits of work. It looked polished, it looked good. They didn't have to worry about spelling, the formatting and things they worked on, the presentation they worked on, and the fact that they could edit it quickly without having to rewrite, physically hand rewrite things, meant that they were likely to take advice from feedback and make changes before the final submission. They dislike blogs and use the device often for a lot of the time as excuses for not doing learning. My battery's flat, I can't log in, I've forgotten my password, the internet down at home, the dog ate my homework. In other words, they were using traditional avoidance behaviour that we've often seen in some of these students. I've lost my pen, I've lost my worksheet, I've left my book at home, except they were attributing it to the device. So that's quite interesting. So maybe the use of the devices we can leverage a little bit more to differentiate the classroom a little bit more. Let our top students, our middle to top students go, give them touch base with them every lesson. How are you going? How are you getting on? Are you following what we've got on the learning management system? Do you need any help? The light touch on those students, let them go ahead and differentiate to the other students in the class who are struggling with a concept, who are finding it difficult, and therefore will make some sort of learning excuse, and maybe we rewrite that digital lesson for them in a much more user-friendly way. So that's one of the things that we find quite interesting. So what now? Well, what now we're calling Feed the Beast. Students are telling us they like feedback, staff are telling us the students are reacting to the feedback, so let's do some more work on feedback, let's give them that feedback, let's really make sure we use the blogs. Students are telling us they like having the work up on the learning management system, the detailed work, where they need to go so that they can work independently. Well, let's let them do that. Let's flip the classroom, put the work up there, let them get ahead independently and become the tutor beside the student rather than the teacher at the front, the sage on the stage. Students are coming up with different ways to express knowledge, so let's not restrict them to a written essay. Let's allow them to express themselves in different ways that are just as effective. And for Z, the app UberSense in Coach's Eye has become a revolutionary in explaining biomechanic and neuromuscular movement. Students can voice over video on those applications and draw on those applications to really explain what they mean rather than trying to have to articulate quite complex issues in a written text-based format. If students are coming up with different contexts to learn the same content, let's feed the beast. Let's allow them to do that. Loosen up, keep an eye on it, become the guide. And if they're becoming more independent self-learners, again, that should be creating time in your classroom to do other really cool stuff. Like being beside, like giving good feedback, like working in small groups, changing the context, producing better resources, because the students are being taught to be independent and get on with their learning themselves, and that's something we need to work on in the future. So anecdotally, some more information that we're getting back. Staff are reporting that our current Year 9s and 10s and 11s, the groups that are behind the original cohort, which are now Year 12s, are better than the original Year 12 cohort. They're better technically at handling the devices, they're much better at using the devices to leverage good learning. And that's to be expected because our staff have had 4 years now experience, so every new cohort that comes through is getting the benefit of that experience, and so we're expecting that. So the question to staff are we holding them back? Those staff that are still at the front of the room, that are still in control, are we holding your students back? We're hearing that the students are working well and are pretty good. Are we maximising their learning? Or are our limitations as teaching staff holding a group back who are naturally now predisposed to learning because we have been through the school now for 3-4 years? And are we allowing them to work independently ahead of themselves? And I'll use the MasterChef analogy. As teachers, if we can put the detailed recipe of learning for them, what they need to learn, the content they need to cover, the context they need to cover, the understandings they need to have, if that's very clear to them, step by step, bit by bit, then we can let them go. Let them get on with themselves, teach them to be independent, and we become the executive chef who just checks the quality at the end as they're going along and at the end before it goes out into the final restaurant. We check and make sure they're okay. Are you managing the situation? Is the quality of what you're producing good enough? So overall, a pretty successful implementation of BYOD at Orewa College. Being the first in New Zealand, being not really having anyone to follow in New Zealand, in a New Zealand context towards NCEA, we're pretty happy with where we've got to and what we've achieved, and we can only see a brighter future.